Hello and welcome to Agency Chat live on Google Hangouts on Air. We're a weekly live podcast, and I have no idea what we're doing this weekend show because we're supposed to be on Blab, but Blab has recently shut its doors very rapidly. We've got a chat going. See if you can jump in there and take a look and give us a chat. And let's get moving forward with some agency talk. So why don't we go around the room? And Andy, how are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Preparing for the move out to Scarborough, which is always exciting, getting out of the downtown core.
Yeah. Hence the WP Meetup East that you started up there.
Yes, so starting up a little bit something to get folks out in the East End, East York, and Scarborough in Toronto to get together and nerd out over WordPress on a regular basis.
That's awesome. Got a few devs over here at Art and Science that are pretty excited about that because they're eastbound as well.
Love to hear that.
Okay, fantastic. And Tom?
Hi there.
Hey there.
Tom Auger. I'm the CTO of Art and Science, the downtown Toronto digital experience design agency. Happy to be back on the show in a new venue.
All right, so let's kick things off. I think people are here and listening, but please say something in chat because we're not sure.
That was one of the nice things about Blab, right? Because you could see kind of who was there, and they had some things going. It'd be actually a worthwhile agency chat to talk about the implosion of Blab once we find out a little bit more what's going on there.
Well, why don't we start off a topic that's very near and dear to my heart with marketing, and it's interesting. We just lost Blab, so we lost a platform that we were working on, which wasn't too bad since it wasn't really a social platform that we were gaining followers or anything else like that. And then this morning I had a client visit the office and they handed me a business card, and their email address was primus.ca. at primus.ca, and I was like, oh, no, not again. I mean, this basic thing of own what you can own, anything else you're just renting is a fundamental thing with marketing, since we can own certain things, and an email address and a website obviously is one, but also sort of the harsh reality is, of course, we don't own the platform Blab. They can shut it down anytime they want. We don't own the platform Google Hangouts on Air because they will be shutting it down in a month. They're a little bit nicer. They're going to give us a month warning. So we're only here temporarily. Looking forward to jumping to Facebook Live, and of course we all know with Facebook that environment can change any moment. We had so many agencies and businesses build up really strong marketing presences on Facebook pages, and then all of a sudden get turned around to that's going to be monetized, and now you don't have that free organic visibility for all of what you're doing there. It's now going to cost you. So the ground shifts a lot when you don't own what you're going for. Let me get you guys your thoughts on that. Tom, Andy?
Well, you know, it's funny you should mention some of these other services. We've recently hit the wall with Instagram, which in June changed their whole API and makes you go through kind of an approval process. And on paper, it sounds pretty benign, but we have a very legitimate app here at the social aggregator that we're building, and we were flat out denied. And the message, kind of the subtext being, if you're not a massive mega corporation with millions of dollars, we're not interested in you. So, you know, again, this is a social platform, right? So if you're hanging your hat on that, you've got to be really, really careful. I don't know that this stuff sails really into your rent versus own, but we've seen it time and again. You know, as a plugin developer, as a theme developer, you've got to be really, really cautious anytime you plug into those third-party things. We saw, you know, big OAuth shifts with Twitter maybe a year and a half ago that caused like half of our sites to start showing errors in the sidebars and stuff, and we needed to be very agile and fix those quickly. And maybe we should have been more proactive to, you know, but it's hard to stay kind of in the flow of all of those things. And I think if you are kind of renting intellectual property or renting sort of virtual space, it's incumbent upon you to stay on the loop about those things and really figure that out. And that begs the whole conversation about, do I use third-party plugins on my WordPress site that I also have to stay up on versus do I handball everything ourselves? And that's a larger discussion, I think. Probably not where you wanted to go with this one.
No, it's actually perfect. Actually, a lot of that stuff, it reminds me actually of something that is kind of true in our world, and there's an economic incentive towards this change that helps us, perhaps, right? So it's challenging in that as an agency owner, now you've got a lot of support requests you're now dealing with. Say my Twitter is no longer working. You also have clients that are perhaps a little bit dismayed at what's happened, even though you might say, well, it's not our fault. It kind of points them in that direction or gives them a whole distaste for everything that's going on online. But that churn does create cash, or it can create cash, because now you have to fix everything, and you tell the client we have to do it right away. And if you're set up to do smaller stuff, I think it actually can be fiscally beneficial if you have that kind of relationship and the client kind of understands what's going on there and is happy with it. Andy, what's your take on that?
I think it's really interesting because I would say that most of our businesses are built in a way where we find ourselves making recommendations to clients on where they should invest in terms of these third-party tools and services. So that could be anything from email marketing to hosting to what you're building your website with. And when you start looking at things like Blab or like these third-party services where their motivation is building a business and finding something that is sustainable in terms of revenue and profit and growing the operation, sometimes that just doesn't align with whatever you want to do. So, for example, if you look at something like MailChimp, MailChimp has a free email marketing tier, but it's completely within their right to shut that down at any point. They don't need to keep that going. Versus something like WordPress, which is open source software, and if Automatic decides to shut down the free tier of WordPress.com, that's not going to have an effect on the software. So when you look at something like Blab and look at what we're trying to do with interactive live conversations, not tying into a client that you have to download onto your computer, there's a big void for something like that. We're starting to see more around live streaming with Facebook Live and Twitch and those different services, but there still isn't that open source, spin it up, easy to use, drop-in replacement for something like Blab.
There's around Facebook, even Twitter, all of that kind of stuff, those platforms, I would really love to see, and I know there's been a tiny little bit done, peer-to-peer social marketing, social platforms, where it is something you own. It is not a centrally controlled thing. It is. But at the same time, you also have to recognize that we live in a world of marketplaces. YouTube's a marketplace. So when you post your video to YouTube versus just on your website, you're posting it to a marketplace that could change radically, including disappear. Same with Facebook. Again, can change radically, including what you want to do on it disappear. Probably Facebook's not going to disappear anytime soon. All of that. So it's one of those ones where your return probably, and your asset that you think you're creating is probably shorter term, or you should think of it as shorter term than some people think. So anybody who really, really invested in Blab, like say we had managed to get into huge number of users that actually depended on the Blab ecosystem to be social and get those users engaged, and we couldn't convert to something like what we're doing here because it's so closely tied in with our meetup and the people that we know, we would not, that would have been an asset that just got wiped clean. So let's move on a little bit. Tom, you had a couple things you wanted to chat about.
Yeah, I think I want to pick your guys' brain on just kind of where you guys sit with regards to, and I think it's come up before, but just in a corporate culture, it's come up today in a couple of discussions I've had with members of the team, and it's been something that's been sort of really I've been wrestling with being fairly new now to art and science, coming over from Zeitgeist. And it's just around that kind of that office working environment and the level of engagement, interpersonal engagement that people have. So we had 21 people, and I bet you if I stepped out of my room right now, it would be dead silent. And it's like that for most of the day. 21 people working in an open space that are dead silent. That's something. It's tangible. It can actually be daunting, and it's really kind of threw me for a loop for the first couple of weeks until I kind of got used to it. And I'm hearing questions around where did that culture come from? Because it hasn't always been like that here. Apparently, is it one that happens at a certain scale? Is it imposed by the physical space and just the need to be quiet? Is it coming from management that is sort of, we got to get to work. We can't have time for chit chat. I know that you have a huge investment, personal investment in crafting an office culture. At Zeitgeist, the office culture grew organically out of the personalities that we hired and the team that we had, and there's sort of a natural kind of desire to have fun and joke around. Then you have a larger organization where it almost feels like it's either been an emergent behavior that's coming out of just the people. Maybe management hasn't actually had a hand in it, and so this is behavior that's kind of just bubbled up to the surface, for better or for worse, that hasn't had any guidance, or maybe it is coming down from the top. And Andy, I'd be really curious to hear from your perspective, since you're working in decentralized, how you're maintaining a sense of culture, and whether that's transitioned to things like Slack or other social media channels.
I really want to hear from Andy on this, because it's one that I struggle with, is how to do something remotely and still have that connection.
It's been a learning experience, because for so long I spent time working either client-side or in agencies where we were physically in the same space. And now, having spent almost a year working remotely with GoDaddy, it's a very different lifestyle and it's a very different experience. And the one common theme that I see stretching across those two ways of working and essentially living is the facilitation. Does the agency, the employer, create opportunities for culture to be created? It's not necessarily the organization creating the culture or saying this is what our culture is going to be. It's doing things like offsites, retreats, getting people out of their working mode so they're spending time with colleagues as people rather than just as co-workers. And you see this also even in, so speaking of co-working, those sort of spaces where everybody's working on a different thing, but they're all sharing a physical place. As long as the experience is facilitated for them to come together, I think culture can build, and it builds as a result of whoever's in the whoever's connected with each other. It reflects the people. I don't think it necessarily reflects the organization. If that makes sense.
I'd actually say your company culture is going to reflect the people. I think, though, that either management is going to be in conflict with that culture, and therefore it's going to warp into something a little bit strange. So if that culture is, there's no personal time, no connection or real meetings, just every minute you're talking with somebody else, that's a bad minute. If that's sort of the message that's coming across, then people are still going to connect with each other. It's just going to be done in a way that, that person's coming through the door. We got to stop, right? And it's going to the culture will still be there, whatever that happens to be. It's just going to be warped and a little bit more, I don't want to say war zone, but it's going to be more challenging to enjoy it. So I'd say, you definitely have to give space to have that connection. You need, otherwise, that space is just going to be created somehow, and it's probably not going to be in the best way the way you want it to be created.
Well, I mean, so that's interesting, right? Because what I hear you saying is management should take an active role in crafting the corporate culture rather than letting it evolve organically out of the personalities that are there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Well,
I mean,
I would
how
say
far do you
what
take
you
it?
want to do is align yourself with the corporate culture, I think. So it does have to be in tune with what's going on. It's not like we got a corporate culture of fitness and this and that, and so, but that's because I'm into fitness and everybody else is like, "Oh, I don't want to do that," or whatever it happens to be, right? We
Mhm.
used to actually do dance parties on Monday mornings. We haven't
Used
done
to.
that.
Ah.
We haven't done that because that's not really that's something that's a little bit challenging to Mike is like to impose on and say, hey, all you new people that just joined the organization, let's dance. It's a little bit of an odd thing. However, that doesn't mean you don't have a culture. It just means you just
Mhm.
of fun or connecting with everybody or not taking things too seriously, even though you do want to be serious. It's just you have to play with what the actual reality is and
It's
encourage
interesting,
it.
Brett. I hear Heather and Richard are also all sort of suggesting that it does start with management as well, so they're echoing
Yeah.
that. And Richard mentioned something about office space. I think this is a very interesting one because what you don't want to do is, like you said, you don't want to impose. You don't want to have dance parties if the team isn't going to respond well to that. But what I'm one of the ways I'm going to try to influence office culture is through space. I
Mm.
want to try to craft spaces. And so right now I'm in my office, which you can see. There's everybody out there, and my office is right now quite bare, and deliberately so, because my office is going to become there it is. The playroom, or I've recently thought, actually, I want to call it the experiential zone.
Mm.
So the plan currently is to turn it into an e-room where you can talk and the room does things for you, and have projection that projects across the walls so that you can actually come into this room and turn it into your personal holodeck. And you can create a team space or a working space or a meeting space that suits your mood and your
Mm.
personality, and it's going to be designed for multiple individuals to use simultaneously. So that's going to be one space, and I also want to have like an exercise space where if you feel like I love to take a break and do some push-ups or whatever, just to, cause it gets my metabolism going and it frees up my brain, and I find that that's really great. But I don't want to do it out there in the public space because it just looks weird, and people are like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" So I think maybe I think there's a thread here around. You don't necessarily need to impose it. You just have to, as management, you have the vision, craft some spaces and let people sort of gravitate, or create opportunities for
Mm.
cultural engagement and let people gravitate or not. And if it doesn't work, recycle and reiterate and try
Mm.
something new. In addition to maybe those kinds of more traditional activities like corporate retreats and having.
I really like that
So
idea of creating opportunities, and it doesn't need to
Mm.
be retreats. It doesn't need to be anything big. It's just experimenting with these different triggers or opportunities for people to do something.
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. That idea of creating different spaces is absolutely fantastic. Sorry, Tom, I'm not sure that you were really finished there.
I think I kind of well. I mean, I should be finished. I want to hear what other people have to say.
I will say one thing. Heather is talking about, the corporate culture starts with management by setting the values.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, and one thing that we did over a year ago at our first company retreat, and we're going to repeat again, is we actually went through and did an exercise for shared values. And it just surfaced what do we all, top 5 or 6 or whatever values that we all kind of can get behind. It voted and there's rounds, and there's a process to that. But what really came out of it was great. We like these shared values. Obviously, we all have our own individual values and whatnot. And that actually informed a lot of the decision making that we were doing as far as how are we going to bring those shared values to our customers. So, for instance, we had a shared value of teamwork. And so one of the things we did when we talked to our customers is say, hey, these are our values. And if we're meeting these values, we think we're being successful. And one of them is teamwork. So what are your values? And so the customer would say whatever their values were. And then we would incorporate that into the project. So just going through that process of not necessarily saying, again, top down, what are the values of this company. That can be fine. You can have a good vision of what's going on here, but also maybe in the day-to-day saying, what values do we all want to sort of march by? It worked, at least for our company. It's small enough that it would work well. I don't know, in a 21-person company, I think it'd be very interesting
You know
to.
what? Yeah, maybe it's not a workshop. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a Mailchimp survey that goes around and just sort of touches on the high level stuff, and then you can drill in once some themes emerge. Or maybe you do, get out the beer keg and then make that topic of a Friday afternoon kind of conversation. I love it though. I think that it would be a mistake to think that as an owner, especially in a larger organization, you have all the answers and you can come in and impose a corporate culture. It's going to be, at best, will feel fabricated and disingenuous. At worst, it could actually really demoralize your team. So, I love this notion of creating opportunities and letting emergent behavior come, take advantage of those opportunities, and two, starting from a position of shared values and actually making that, exposing that, and bringing everybody into the feeling of those shared values, and then sort of exploring how does that translate into our working environment and our day-to-day.
Yeah, and then one last thing on that, Tom, though, is as a manager, leader, whatever it is that you are, one of the things, I mean, it's a big job. It's a round-the-clock job. Sometimes it feels it's a lot. And so, at least for myself, I have a certain culture that I want here, because I need something that will sustain me, and a culture that doesn't sustain me means there's not necessarily a right fit. I know Jeremy Choi, who's I think watching this, specifically hires and has a whole set of criteria in which to hire the right people that will fit his culture that he wants within his company, probably both for good business reasons, as in to grow or whatever those objectives are, but I'm guessing also because they align very closely to what his values are. So it's not a, hey, you've just hired a bunch of technically skillful people and what are their values? It would be, let me introduce the value system that a new hire that's coming in would also merge with the rest of what's going on in the team. Andy, do you have anything on your mind agency-wise?
I actually wanted to go back to something that Tom had said, because it really excited me, was calling out astroturfing. So trying to fabricate culture. I just find that very frustrating as a team member, because I've seen it in, especially in startups, where there's this feeling that you need to have a quote-unquote startup culture, when really all you need to do is create those opportunities. The culture will come up by itself. You don't need to force it. And then also, speaking as an agency employee, Brent, to the point that you made about what you want the culture to be, I love hearing that from whoever's leading the team, but then also hearing from everyone else on the team, what do they want the culture to be, and what are the core values that resonate with them, and then seeing how we can facilitate all of that. What can we do to make all of those things work, so everyone is feeling fulfilled from it?
Yeah, I'd have to say in our space, I think culture that is actually equals spend a heck of a lot of time of your time here, way beyond what you would normally consider the norm, isn't really a culture. It's just sort of a way to motivate people to give up their life. So, I mean, I know, at least anecdotally, of downtown agencies that they actually sell their team billable at 60 hours per week, as in you need to do billable work at that level. And then outside of that, and that's actually sold to the client, and so it's at an unbelievable rate. And the startup culture sounds, at least again anecdotally, along a similar vein, which is, hey, we're in the tech sector, this is what we do. We go as fast as possible. And I think agencies sometimes, just because we're in a similar sector or in the technology sector, that it gets pulled over to deadlines and all this sorts of things, where it just I think it's actually not a long term, if you're thinking long term with your team, process. I know in the larger agency world, apparently the churn is massive. It's basically, hey, I just got offered 20K more, I'm gone, bye.
Sure. It's interesting you talk about that. I think that with that shift of culture, if you're prepared to make that shift, and you're talking about, you want people to be able to enjoy their space and to live a life and be human beings instead of robots that churn out 60 billable hours a week, because I have this to say to agencies that treat their employees like that. On the flip side of that is you need to, each individual employee needs to have their own sense of agency and responsibility and accountability, so that, we're going to create a foosball court in the middle of the office, and everyone's going to want to play it, but you're still responsible for getting these deliverables done. And we are going to do everything we can as managers and project managers and salespeople to make sure that we're selling reasonable expectations around deliverables, timelines, and billable hours. And you have to do the same thing and take however much time you want during the day, but get that work done and have fun and participate in office culture. So you can't also try to manufacture office culture and then not allow them to have the time to do it. But you can't also, on the flip side, you got to be careful that suddenly this place doesn't turn into a big playground and that's all people are doing, and you start to lose money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where it turns into what is management's role, right? Is it to manage the team, or is it to manage the project, or is it to manage the clients? And really, I'd almost say it's probably the clients and the projects first. The team is really, if there's something really going wrong for some reason, and it always happens, approach it with a little bit of kindness and sort of start addressing it directly. And if you've got a bit of an open culture, as in these are conversations you can have and there's space to have that, and you approach it, I would say, as direct as possible, but non-judgmental, usually you're going to get that level of trust where the team's like, you know what, okay, I kind of slacked off last week. Really wasn't in the game, but the consequences were somebody noticed and had a conversation with me that did not feel like, do this or again and you'll be fired, kind of situation. And I think that can, if you've got the right team members, do a wonderful job. If you don't, that's going to, show itself out over time. And I think sometimes we have to be willing to go through that process of a little bit more pain over time for a lot more gain, as overall your team is working at a much more higher productive level because there's that trust level. So I would say the cost-benefit ratio of that sort of trust and conversation and relationship building is huge compared to the little bit that you'll lose, because the little bit of shrinkage you'll have because not everybody's 100% productive all the time.
Agreed. Looks like we're out of time.
Yeah.
Nice wrap up there. I kind of like this format. I think Google Hangouts, for the month that we have it, could be a decent alternative. I don't know if there's rebroadcastability the way we had with Blab, but
no, this is going directly to my YouTube channel. So it'll be, yeah, and we should probably hook it up with Posada so we got everything all in the same place. So why don't we give our credentials on the way out, and we'll start with you, Andy.
Awesome. So I'm at AndyMCI on Twitter, AndyMCI.com, pretty much AndyMCI everywhere.
At Tom Auger is my Twitter handle, and you can check out Art Science and the cool things we do at artscience.ca.
Okay, awesome. And I'm Brent Kobayashi from Kobayashi Online. You can see me on Twitter at Brent Kobayashi, on the web, kobayashi.ca. And then last but not least, you can check us out on the web at agency.chat, our website, and then also in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/agency-chat, where we engage and we have a great bunch of people that have continued the conversation throughout the week. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next week.